Agriculture and Enabling Just Energy Transition in South Asia conference. Most of you have been working on solar energy, energy transition, irrigation for years in your respective organization. And today, in the next 3 days, is a great opportunity to meet, to learn from each other across different regions of the world, different countries, across our disciplinary backgrounds with different institutional and technical arrangements in the work that we do. This forum is really a knowledge sharing forum, and we'll have rich discussion. And I already feel really energized to see all the new faces in this room and to know that we learn from each other in the next 3 days. So I hope we'll also be sharing this, feeling this energy, and in a sense also build a community of researchers and practitioners ready to take up this challenge of energy transition. I want to say that this conference is being organized by IWMI, the International Water Management Institute, through the Solar Project. The Solar Project here stands for Solar Irrigation for Agricultural Resilience. And this project is being funded by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. We are also partnering with another IWMI project, the CGR initiative, Transforming Agri-Food System in South Asia. This event is also organized thanks to a number of partners, the first of them being the Indian Institute of Technology in Gandhinagar here, welcoming us in this peaceful environment and great campus. Thank you to them for that. And they do so through the Dr. Kiram C. Patel Center for Global Solution. Other partners are the World Resource Institute, India, the Global Green Growth Institute, IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, Ahmedabad University through the Global Center for Environment and Energy, the International Solar Alliance, and the German cooperation, especially with GIZ. So in this inaugural session, we'll start with the welcoming address, which will come from Dr. Alok Sikka. Dr. Alok Sikka is the India IWMI country representative. Please, Dr. Sikka.
Thank you, Mary. Good morning to all. Dr. Rajat Muna, Director, Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. Sorry, not Kharagpur. That's my alma mater. So I'm so Director of IIT Gandhinagar, and Janine Kuriger, who is head of the climate change, disaster risk reduction and environment at the SDC. Dr. Frank Reiberman, I think, who is online, or will be having his presentation recorded message. Then we have with us Dr. Ulka Kelkar, my colleagues, Dr. Aditi Mukherjee and Dr. Marie Charlotte, all the learned and august audience, members of the media and the press, ladies and gentlemen. It's my proud privilege to welcome you all and to this land of Mahatma Gandhi, as perhaps most of you would know, because this is the Gujarat is the place where Mahatma Gandhi was born and worked. And also this beautiful and sprawling campus of IIT Gandhinagar, because the purpose, as Aditi and I were discussing, because we thought that there would not have been anything better than this kind of a IIT campus, because IITs in India are the most premier institutions in the technology sector. And so this is one of the IITs, as you must have seen, and we'll go around, that it's one of the very biggest and the nicest campus. And so we welcome you, Dr. Rajat Muna, and at the same time, I thank you also. I know that at the welcome address, shouldn't be thanking you, but because you will not be there after that. And also particularly my old friend and colleague, Dr. Vimal Mishra, because who has been pretty much after this, managing this entire event, and I know is with along with his students, etc. And Madam Janine Kuriger from SDC, we welcome you, Janine. And but for the fact that it is supported by SDC, it wouldn't have been possible for all of us to be here. And one thing which I always tell Divya, that we do not consider this, that here SDC is always acting like a partner. And we have been right from the beginning, from the day one, we conceptualize and work together. So we always feel that they are not just only the donors or the funders or the supporters, but you guys are so much ingrained and so much involved with the project that really I have no words to really express our gratitude to you on that. So, and as you all know that this is the project supported by SDC, and this particular project is a regional project, and as I understand perhaps from Devya, this is one of the few or the first, I do not know, the regional project, because which is there in India, Nepal, Bangladesh and Pakistan on the solar. And I would not dwell upon the details of the solar irrigation project because my colleague Aditi is there. If I start talking about that, then I'll be taking away what she is going to be talking about. So I'll not be talking about that. Then we have with us Dr. Ilka Kelkar, who is represents. So welcome to you, Dr. Kelkar. She represents WRI. WRI is, as already she has pointed out, Mari, that WRI is one of our co-partners in organizing this particular event. And my colleagues, Aditi, I welcome my colleague Aditi, and especially my welcome to Murray, because who has come all the way for this particular event from France. And she is also working with this particular project, and she is contributing largely, I guess, in the Bangladesh segment. Then we have many other delegates who have come from various other countries and our country partners. We have in this project, as I mentioned to you, that we are very, very key players with us and who are really playing a key role with all of us, and they are the country partners. And I welcome all the country partners starting from Bangladesh, that is IDCOL, Infrastructure Development Company Limited. Of course, they will be joining us shortly because their flight got delayed. So they have just reached very early morning. So they'll be joining us shortly in a while or so. And then from Nepal, AEPC, that is the Alternate Energy Promotion Center, and Nepal Electricity Authority. So we welcome you and all the other guests from Nepal as well. Then from India, we have right now where we are sitting in Gujarat, GUVNL, that is Gujarat Urja Vikas Limited. And the project where we are working, because that's called Sky Surya Shakti Kisan Yojana in this part of the state, and that's where we are working. And then from Pakistan, we have got Pakistan Agriculture Research Council. And so in addition to all the delegates here, all the learned delegates and august audience and the members of the media and the press, I also welcome all those who have joined us online. There are virtual audience as well, because our colleagues from Pakistan and also from very other centers. Let me also welcome, because I'll be failing in my duty if I don't welcome my own colleagues from IWMI who have come from Nepal and Uzbekistan and from South Africa. You will be happy to know that there are representation from 16 countries in this event. And so that itself speaks volume about it, the kind of the importance and the kind of the interest people they have in this very important topic of solar irrigation. Because as I said, that particularly in this part of the world, in the South Asia, a lot of impetus is there on the solar energy because that's a clean energy, and particularly where groundwater development is very fast and depletion of the groundwater is also a concern. And together with that, it goes energy. So it's this entire region, South Asia region, is water and energy intensive. And when there is so much energy intensive, and where it's predominance of diesel as well as the electric motors and the pumps, so one can understand the kind of the climate change constraints which we have. So this is one of the reasons also that when we are talking over here, that how best, and when we are looking over here in case of the just energy transition, because this is the kind of the thing that we are talking about, the just energy transition, and it is one of the strategy towards adaptation and mitigation to climate change. And what you will see and unfolding today and tomorrow is that largely what we are going to be talking about will be particularly in that direction. Let me also welcome all the other partners who are here with us, the conference partners, like already she has mentioned. I'll again be repeating, of course, from SDC and from ISA, from WRI, because ISA, Dr. Sharma, they are our global partner, from CEW, GIZ, and GGGI, and IRENA. So these are so I welcome all of you to this particular event. And I think with these few words, I'll again say that we are really delighted to have you all over here. And before I close, let me also mention very briefly about IWMI. What IWMI is all about. International Water Management Institute is a global organization. It's one of the CGIAR research centers. We work for research for development in the water sector. And our main forte is that we work in partnership with the government, civil society, and the private sector organization to look into and solve the various land and water management related issues addressed towards agriculture, environment, climate change, and so on and so forth. And we have our headquarters in Colombo with our research, with our country offices in 13 countries, and we are operating in more than 40 countries through various projects. So we are really delighted to have you all over here. So with these words, I welcome one and all for this particular event, and over to you, Mari. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sika, for this welcome address. We'll now have opening remarks, and I will first invite Janine Krieger for their opening remark. So Janine Krieger is the head of division of the Global Program Climate Change and Environment at the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation.
Good morning, namaste. So it's a great pleasure for me to be here today. Actually, I had the privilege to serve in India for 4 years between 2013 and 17. And it was actually at that time that the idea for working on solar irrigation came first up. So I'm really pleased now, several years later, to be back and have the opportunity to exchange with you all about the experiences we have made so far in this topic. So first of all, Dr. Sika, thanks a lot for this very warm welcome. We felt very well received last night. We had the opportunity to get around a little bit, get an impression of Gujarat. And also thanks a lot to Dr. Muna for being able to stay at your university to enjoy also this beautiful guest house. So also on behalf of the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, I would like to welcome you to this regional forum entitled Energizing Agriculture and Enabling Just Energy Transition in South Asia. The reality of climate change is triggering a global shift away from fossil fuels. As other sectors of the energy, for example, the power sector, starts decarbonizing at ever faster rates, the agriculture sector too is increasingly becoming a focus for emission reductions. The agriculture sector is highly exposed to the current impacts and future risk of climate change, in particular the smallholder farmers. Any move towards energy transition in the agriculture sector must happen in a manner that does not add to the burden of these smallholder farmers. And the cost and benefits of any climate action must be fairly distributed. This regional forum has been organized to promote the exchange of knowledge, experiences, and learnings that may provide some suggestions for developing ideas and approaches for sustainable and fair transition of energy mix in the agriculture sector. The event actually was initially conceived to be organized under the aegis of the Swiss Agencies for Development and Cooperation support the project Solar. But then actually we felt that a lot others were interested in the topic too. And we thought, why not make it actually a bigger event altogether? So that's why we have joined hands with other institutions. And we are very proud to have the World Resources Institute, the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, the International Solar Alliance, the Green Growth Institute, and the German corporation, and the IIT Gandhinagar and the Ahmedabad University as our partners in this event. It is truly a privilege for SDC to join hands with all of these organizations. And also, we are very pleased to have their interest and commitment to the topic of water, energy, foods nexus. I think this has really added that they brought their value to the richness of the program we are having in the next 2 days. So thank you, every one of you, to have joined hands. Agriculture continues to be essential to livelihoods and food security of many developing and emerging economies across the world. The widespread availability of pumping technologies and the expansion of groundwater irrigation has played an important role in intensifying agriculture production. The dependence of agriculture on water and energy is becoming even more acute in the face of climate change. The farmers have to increasingly rely on irrigation to counter the impacts of the rising temperature and rainfall variability. This is leading to growth in energy demand and furthering the pressure on the groundwater resources. South Asia is no exception to this. With more than 25 million pumps annually lifting 350 square kilometers of groundwater, the irrigation economy in South Asia is overwhelmingly dependent on access to energy subsidies, both electricity and diesel. On one hand, this is leading to overexploitation of groundwater aquifers. At the same time, many smallholder farmers faced by the lack of reliable access to electricity are forced to under-irrigate due to the high diesel costs. The South Asian countries have deployed various strategies to address these issues. This includes rationing electricity supply and promoting water and energy efficient technology, but also we have also seen the launch of ambitious renewable energy programs. Bolstered by steep decline in panel prices and entry of multiple private sector companies into this market, solar irrigation pumps are increasingly becoming an important part of the renewable energy strategies and agriculture support programs of many governments. But its adoption continues to face some challenges. These include understanding the potential impact of the technology on the groundwater resources. Secondly, transferring the benefits of technology promotion to small and holder and women farmers. And third, also ensuring the financial viability of this technology adoption. SDC, as an agency concentrating its efforts on climate resilience and mitigation, launched the solar project in 2020, along with IWMI, to dive deeper into some of these challenges. The project aims to contribute to government efforts on the promotion of solar irrigation pumps, while ensuring long-term groundwater sustainability and gender equality and social inclusion in Bangladesh, India, Nepal, and Pakistan. The solar project is a follow-up of an earlier SDC support to the IWMI-led innovative project that worked connecting standalone solar irrigation pumps to the electric grid which was tested in Gujarat. This innovative idea led to the foundation of a large government-driven scheme launched by the state of Gujarat. And this scheme actually was later embedded at the into a national scheme. At this regional forum, you will hear more about some of the interesting findings and insight and results of the project, and you will also get a chance to visit some of the sites where the project is currently operational. The project efforts in Gujarat are all thanks to the support extended by the Gujarat Urja Vikam Nigam Limited, the state electricity utility company, and I wholeheartedly thank them for the same. STC actually is just one entity in the large pool of organizations working with many experienced researchers, practitioners, and policymakers on the topic of solar irrigation, with some of whom we have also had good relationship for a long time. Some of you are new partners. It is actually their extensive work that would allow us to dive deeper into some of the key challenges that plague the adoption of solar irrigation technologies during the course of these next 3 days. I take this opportunity to thank everyone who has joined to us today, whether physically or online, for sparing their precious time to share their knowledge and experiences. It is our presence, I think, and contributions that would make the Regional Forum a success. And I'm really looking forward to the deliberations and also the visits in the next few days. So thanks a lot and have a fruitful meeting.
Thank you, Janine, for this introduction. I would now like to invite Rajat Muna, that is the director of the Indian Institute of Technology of Gandhinagar, for his welcoming address.
Thank you, Mary. All the distinguished delegates on the dais, off the dais, ladies and gentlemen, let me first of all welcome everybody to IIT Gandhinagar for this discussion on a very important topic related to sustainability and climate change, and especially very, very important in the context of South Asia, which are representing some major agricultural economies and agricultural countries. Often it is said that climate changes are for real. I mean, that I think we don't really need to emphasize, but often it is said that climate changes effects require a reversal, and that reversal can possibly happen through our grassroots connections, through agriculture, through livestock, and through going back to the nature. What is going to happen, how it is going to take place and all that, it is yet to be seen. Experts here are probably going to deliberate on many of such topics. But I would actually probably say that the beautiful campus that you are living in right now, or going to move in and probably see the campus, if you have not seen it already, it actually has several sustainability aspects which are actually part of the design. It is among these categories probably the first campus to get what is known as Graha 5-star large area development rating, something equivalent to LEED Platinum rating. From the sustainability aspects, this is a ranking which is actually done by India itself. Several features which are incorporated in this are net zero discharge. All the water, all the sewage that we actually take, we collect, we extract water through the sewage treatment plant and use it for horticulture. We don't have enough water of, this particular area actually is water deficient. But then in a water deficient area, we suddenly have a beautiful sprawling campus full of greenery. This itself is a very big value for this part of the world. We actually, on one side, we have the desert of Rajasthan. On the other side, we have the deserts of Kutch. And in between these two, this is a hamlet that we have of green thing that we are trying to nurture. The campus sustainability aspects also include many other things. We kind of harvest the rainwater. All the rainwater that is collected is stored in what is underground tanks, what is known as Jal Mandap, which is basically a dancing hall for the water, in literal meaning. But it's basically and beautiful areas. You can actually just walk over that, walk around and all that, and we use this water for our tough times. I already talked about zero water discharge, but even the solid waste, we do quite a lot of solid waste management. All the solid effluents from the sewage are converted to manure and then they are used within the campus so it doesn't go out. Even other kind of solid waste, there is a huge processing that takes place within the campus. I think this is something that we could do to the climate, to the environment around, and to the sustainability. The climate change is absolutely visible. The glacial mounting, rise of the ocean levels, and sinking of several several landmass. I think these have been witnessed over last several decades, but this acceleration has happened much faster in the current times. With this particular thing in mind, when we are actually looking at how we can use the solar energy, the only source of energy that the planet has is the solar source of energy which comes from outside, and use of that solar energy in our day-to-day living and even energizing the agricultural sector, especially in the South Asian economies where agriculture is the major component. I think this cannot be a better workshop on this. And therefore, I would like to congratulate all the organizers for taking up this particular topic, especially IWMI, WRI, SDC, all of you who have actually taken up all this very important thing, and all the delegates who have actually come from various parts of the world. We hope you will actually have a good time in the campus and some fruitful discussions. Thank you very much for inviting me here. All the best.
Thank you, Rajat Muna. I started by saying that this campus was very peaceful, but it's now also inspiring by itself. So thank you for that, and thank you for welcoming us here again. We'll now have opening remarks by Frank Ridgeman. He's not there, so we'll have that through a recording. So Frank Ridgeman is the Director General of the Global Green Growth Institute.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to speak with you today about decarbonizing and recarbonizing the agri-food system. My name is Frank Rijsberman. I'm the Director General of the Global Green Growth Institute. I'm sorry I can't be in person, but I hope you'll have a wonderful meeting. First, I assume that for this audience, we can agree that the world is facing an unprecedented sustainability crisis, a multi-dimensional crisis. Not only climate, I'm sorry I cannot be with you in person. Sustainability that ought to be time to recognize that we shouldn't just look at agriculture by itself, but that we ought to look at the food system or the agri-food system. I was very pleased to see the World Food System Summit recently that put this forward as a compelling need to transform the agri-food system to make it more sustainable. Of course, over time, there have been many solutions proposed for the lack of sustainability in agriculture, from agroforestry to bioeconomy to others that I'm listing here. But few people have come together to really put their weight behind a single approach to making our agri-food system more sustainable, which I personally do believe is absolutely necessary. Having worked on sustainable natural resources management for almost my entire career, the last 40 years, it is quite a pleasure to see that climate change, and therefore decarbonization or net zero, has finally reached the top of the political agenda for many non-insiders, ministers of finance, leaders of government, and so on. And I think that does create an enormous opportunity to take this challenge of making the agri-food system more sustainable seriously. And I'm proposing here a couple of principles. Yes, I think there is agreement now that we ought to prioritize decarbonization of the agri-food system. That means reducing the use of fossil fuel throughout the system, from farm to fork, but also reducing methane emissions. And at the same time, I hope we will not only look at decarbonizing, but also at recarbonizing, sequestering carbon through a healthy living soil and living biomass, such as forest and mangroves. And then, if we at the same time focus as well on ecosystem conservation, ending deforestation, wetland conversion, and other forms of land use change that were and are often driven by agriculture, maintain what is left of biodiversity, and focus on rehabilitating degraded ecosystems, reforestation, improving mangroves and wetlands, rebuilding natural systems, then I believe we have a short set of key overarching principles that could together make the agri-food system more sustainable. And there are real opportunities for triple wins: issues, solutions, approaches that will decrease emissions while increasing resilience and conserving biodiversity. I think that should be the heart of our concerns. Let me give you a very brief introduction to GDGI, for those of you who don't know it, and our work linked to healthy agri-food systems. Global Green Growth Institute is not really an institute. It's a treaty-based international and intergovernmental organization focused on supporting the accelerated green transition of our member countries. So while GDGI does other work, particularly work related to policies and regulatory frameworks, the most important feature of our work that our members appreciate is our focus on finance, focus on mobilizing green and climate finance for our member countries in a few theme areas, of which one is sustainable landscapes linking to healthy agri-food systems. Concretely, what we do linked to finance, as we are not a donor or a funder, but rather a provider of technical assistance, is we help our member countries originate, develop, structure, and finance bankable projects related to infrastructure, develop national financing vehicles, funds, and sustainable finance instruments such as green bonds, and help them get access to international sources of climate finance, such as the Green Climate Fund, GEF, and MDBs. A key feature of our work is that the bulk of our about 600 staff and consultants working for GDGI work in about 37 of our member and partner countries, embedded in our governments, ministries of finance, planning, and environment. And in this slide, you can see how our project funding in 2022, roughly $60 million, was distributed over regions, countries, and what we call programmatic solutions. You'll see there that both sustainable forests and climate resilient agriculture are some of our largest, what we call programmatic solutions. In the remainder of this talk, let me give you a bit of a bird's eye view of our work related to the agri-food system. And then, of course, a number of my GGI colleagues are also participating in the meeting. We'll present more detailed papers in the rest of the meeting as well. The first example I'd like to share is our work in Colombia, where we've helped develop a national green growth plan, but most of our work has focused on forest conservation in the Amazon, helping the Colombian government implement their so-called joint declaration with several donor countries that will mobilize significant funding for Colombia if Colombia can meet a number of results that are linked to results-based payments. GGI has helped the government of Colombia negotiate these agreements and helped implement their realization. As part of that work, we helped the Colombian government develop a Colombian bioeconomy strategy and a forest economy strategy that helps the green transition away from fossil fuel and coal mining towards using natural resources sustainably through a host of opportunities to build the economy based on the bioeconomy, circular economy, and of course, a particular feature that the Colombian government likes is that this is linked to a very large number of green jobs that can be created this way. To implement this bioeconomy strategy, we are currently working with a number of government departments, particularly the Ministry of Science and Technology, to operate a number of funds that help small and medium enterprises come up with bioeconomy businesses. I had the pleasure of visiting one of those companies that is benefiting from this facility, a company that helps farmers grow child palms that are generating a superfood and provide income to these farmers away from growing narcotics, illegal crops, or cutting the forest down for livestock. Their activities go all the way from growing the seedlings and providing farmers with the trees, all the way to processing plants where the smallholder farmers growing these acai palms can bring their harvest, acai berries, and where these are processed into frozen organic acai berry products that is available in supermarkets. Another of our forest conservation projects in Latin America is in Peru, where GGI works closely with ICRAF and Peruvian legal NGO to promote a form of stewardship for farmers that gain better land title to the areas where they have practiced so far shifting cultivation to turn them into stewards of the forest. We also have a large team in Indonesia that has worked on forest conservation, mangrove restoration, peatland restoration for quite a few years now, and has mobilized some significant funds, hundreds of millions of dollars, for the Indonesian government to implement jurisdictional forest management programs. A key part of our support for Indonesia and more than 30 other of our member countries is to help them gain access to the Green Climate Fund, from selecting ideas to structuring those to finding the right kind of financial partners. And that is leading, again, to large volumes of climate financing flowing to the Indonesian government. Beyond forest conservation, we work on rehabilitation as well. for example, in this project in Uzbekistan, where particularly in Karakalpakstan, the part of Uzbekistan that is right around the Aral Sea, we're working with small farmers to rehabilitate the areas that are, if you like, severely affected by the Aral Sea disaster. In Ethiopia, we are implementing a major program funded by the Korean Development Aid to reforest some 13,000 hectares of degraded lands as part of nature-based solutions in Ethiopia. Moving to our work on improving value chains, we do also have a project in Ethiopia on improving the coffee value chain, also funded through Korea. And like that, we have a number of other similar whole value chain approaches that go from identifying climate risk to helping farmers create additional value by creating processing facilities, like here in the Philippines. Another example of such a value chain project in the Pacific, in Kiribati, small island, particularly vulnerable to climate change and with a health and nutrition crisis, where we are focusing on a range of activities from school gardens to working with vegetable farmers across the value chain. Another example from Nepal, where this climate smart agriculture value chain project focuses on reintegrating workers that were displaced, working in the Middle East and sent home during the COVID pandemic. One final example of an agriculture value chain project in Senegal, before we move to what is also the focus of our contribution to this workshop, solar irrigation. While solar-powered irrigation has advanced significantly in Asia and will be discussed at length during this meeting, GGI and I personally believe that this is also an important opportunity for Africa, and we have started with the introduction and promotion of solar-powered systems, together with developing business models and financial systems to make these sustainable in Burkina Faso, in Ethiopia, in Uganda, and then also in Senegal. My colleagues will share this experience with you in this meeting through a number of additional presentations. I had the pleasure to have a field visit to this project in Senegal. And of course, while in Burkina Faso, solar-powered irrigation would increase the resilience of what is currently rain-fed agriculture. In Senegal, there's a lot of pumped irrigation, where the pumping is currently powered through fossil fuel generated electricity, and farmers are very keen to replace that by solar energy, in part because the cost of energy through fossil fuel is, of course, extremely high right now. In Senegal, I met with a group of farmers, a farmer cooperative that invested their own resources to invest in the solar panels that you see here, which were used to power their pumps, and they had figured out that this was a direct economic benefit for them. You see here the pumping station that is now powered through solar energy, used to be on the grid, and for farmers that was a very large cost that they could reduce by switching to solar energy. Our project also worked with the farmers to give them broader capacity building on climate smart agriculture, particularly focusing on more appropriate seed varieties. While in the first year of the project, we helped demonstrate that there are a number of more adapted seed varieties. Our work currently consists of working with the Senegal Agricultural Bank to make credit lines available to farmers who are interested in buying improved seed. I could give you many more examples, but I am running out of time. So let me just list with you one particularly relevant program that we hope to start later this year, a rather large $20 million program to work across the 10 ASEAN countries to work on reduction of methane emissions, focusing both on livestock and on rice agriculture. Winding up with a few cross-cutting issues. One of them is green jobs. We have quite significant assessments of the green jobs that implementing the NDCs will generate. We've looked at renewable energy, forestry, and this year we hope to complete a project on green jobs created through climate smart agriculture. The final cross-cutting issue I'd like to point out is a large team that we have that works on capacity building for Article 6 carbon trading. And while that team has a preference for renewable energy and other simpler things, we hope that they will eventually also move to including carbon trading linked to climate smart agriculture in this program. It's another important area that we look for partnerships with those of you that are here in the room. In conclusion, I hope that you agree with me that making agri-food systems more sustainable should be a top priority we all share, and it certainly is one for GGI. We believe that there are many solutions that are either commercially viable or almost commercially viable, both for decarbonizing and for recarbonizing the agri-food system. We believe that attracting green and climate finance for bankable projects and sustainable business model should be a key priority, and it is one for GNGI. Of course, increasing climate resilience is a top priority for Africa, and we hope that solar-powered irrigation can be a sustainable triple win, one that can decrease emissions, increase resilience, and increase productivity and decrease poverty. GGI is certainly keen to partner on solar-powered irrigation in Africa, and I hope that this will be an excellent opportunity, this meeting, to make new connections and to learn how to take that priority forward. I thank you for your attention.
First of all, thank you to the organizers, to IIT Gandhinagar and to Professor Vimal Mishra. When I came to him asking, can we do this here? He immediately said yes. So, and since then we have been discussing this and organizing, doing this for the last 3-4 months, and they have extended every cooperation for us to be able to do this in such a lovely venue. What I'm hoping, sorry, will this black thing keep showing, or can this go on the top, or it's fine? I mean, it's okay if it doesn't. No, this part, this one. Okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you. So what I'm going to present, this project was started right in 2020, December 2019. So it started in 2019, and then right after, then we had 2 years of pandemic, but work continued. And what I tried to, so now we have covered around 3 years of this project, and most of you here are here because you are interested overall in solar irrigation and also how it leads to energy transition. I just wanted to take some 10-15 minutes to say some of the major highlights of the project. Where should I be pointing? Oh. Sorry. No, I want to go to the next slide. Go backward, this next slide. Okay. So I don't want to, so the context of South Asia, as most of us here involved in this, we already know that in South Asia, we are the world's largest user of groundwater, over 250 cubic kilometer of groundwater, using almost 22 million. Oh. So you can. Thank you. And also that groundwater irrigation contributes to substantial emission. And while there are, the presentation that Frank just made talked about mitigation. And when we talk about agricultural mitigation, we often think of methane, and we often think of, we somehow never think of energy as a, like we can do some mitigation in the energy sector, because in some ways South Asia is quite unique, because this is the only part of the world where you have 20 to 25% of your energy going for irrigation. No other part of the world really uses so much of irrigation. So therefore, what happens is that in this entire decarbonization kind of a debate, when agriculture comes out, it doesn't really in the context of irrigation. And that's a bit unfortunate, because most of the time when we talk of the AFLU sector mitigation, there are always trade-offs. Like if you're talking about mitigation in, say, rice paddy, it almost often involves reduction in productivity, all said and done, things like wet and dry agriculture. So all of those, but solar irrigation is one of those in which your negatives are almost not there. I mean, you are simply replacing one source of water with another source of water. You're just replacing the energy. So many of the trade-offs that you will find in many mitigation are not so much, are not really valid in this one. And we are seeing that almost, so there is quite a fast progress of solar irrigation in the region. We now have over 300,000 solar pumps in the region, most of them in India, but also very fast progress in Nepal, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. And while we do have the first generation questions were like, what is appropriate financing? Again, the previous presentation by Frank was saying that those are the kind of questions being asked in Africa. So I think in South Asia, we do have a lot of answers around appropriate financing. Well, those are not yet closed, but we understand some of it. The focus of this project was really to answer more of the second generation questions around sustainability, gender, equity, and social inclusion, particularly groundwater sustainability. So the project is divided into 3 work packages. We are into generating evidence, and throughout the 2 days, we will be hearing from various sessions about some of the evidence that has been generated on these various aspects. Part of it around piloting and testing solutions and knowledge sharing, and this is one of the knowledge sharing activities. Okay. So just briefly, the project, if you look at it, has got these 4 aspects: mitigation, adaptation, resilience, building, gender equity and inclusion, and groundwater sustainability. And while my colleagues in all the next sessions would present much in-depth information on each of these, I wanted to here provide a short snapshot. For one, SIPs are a clear win for mitigation. There's various literature. I'm not going to read out the numbers, but it's basically when you're replacing dirty fuel with clean energy, obviously mitigation will happen. So these are all the various studies that are showing the quantum of mitigation that is possible. And from our studies, we are finding that in Nepal, this is an example from Nepal, when a farmer uses solar irrigation, what we are finding is that they're not 100% replacing diesel. There is still some diesel use happening because of various reasons. It's not inevitable that diesel use will continue, but currently it's still continuing, but there is a reduction of almost 80% diesel use. So farmers are using much less diesel if they adopt solar pumps. And the reason some of the diesel use is still happening are related to repair and maintenance, in the sense that the solar pumps break down, or there is, in the winter season, there is fog. So there is like a large reduction, and this kind of, adds up to quite a bit of reduction in diesel use. Similarly, in Bangladesh, and Orchishman will present more in the sessions on Bangladesh, our studies are showing that solarizing 3 million hectares of diesel irrigated area can reduce so much, 1 to 1.6 million metric tons of CO2 every year. And yeah, so there are all those bottom up and top down calculations. The second body of evidence is around mitigation benefit. I think is clear. There isn't so much of, mixed evidence or debate around mitigation benefit. On the others, I think there are all kinds of evidence. Do these SIPs contribute to adaptation and reduce vulnerability to climate risk? On the first one, whether it does hedges against rainfall variability, we have very good examples from both Bangladesh and Nepal. And I think our colleagues who are from the Tel Aviv University will be presenting the first one, which is from the Saptari case study in Nepal, which we are finding that these pumps are absolutely used during. Now what's happening with the monsoon is that we may have the same amount of rainfall, but the rainfall variability has increased. So there are bigger stretches between two rainfall events. And that's when traditionally a lot of our monsoon crops were rain-fed. But that doesn't work anymore because of very long stretches of, event, that's gap between the events. So we are finding that these solar pumps are of course used in the non-rainfall season, but they're also been increasingly used to hedge against that rainfall variability. We found that quite clearly in Bangladesh this year when rainfall was delayed, and during our field work, we could see that the only patches of green were the plots where solar pumps were installed, and farmers depending on diesel pumps simply did not switch on their pumps because it's just not economical to do so. In Bangladesh also, we are finding that quite a lot of use of solar pumps during the rainy season. Then we are also finding a lot of evidence of crop diversification. In the literature, we say that crop diversification is a proven climate adaptation strategy. In some sites, again, evidence is a bit mixed. In Bangladesh, we find that those who adopt solar irrigation actually tend to not diversify, but concentrate more on the summer boro paddy, which is water intensive, while those depending on diesel kind of are more diverse farmers. But on the other hand, in Nepal, we found that from our study that 21% of SIP owners who adopted solar for the first time actually introduced more new crops. So I think Deepak Varshne, my colleague, and Shishir, they would be presenting evidence that adoption of solar pumps increases introduction of new crops, particularly vegetables. Then we also looked at overall what's happening with the income, cost, and profits. So overall, a big picture is that we are finding evidence of enhanced income from agriculture due to a number of reasons. One is due to cultivation of high value crops, example, orchards. In Pakistan, we are finding that farmers with solar pump are more likely to cultivate more orchard crops. Or vegetables, as we found in Nepal, and those are more profitable crops overall. And as well as in Bangladesh, we are finding higher yields. I think Mari has done this study. She has led this study where we are finding significant and positive impact of irrigation from SIP on the boro. Boro is the intensive summer crop. So yields of like farmers who use solar pumps have a higher yield of crops than farmers who don't, controlling for everything else. The other reason for increase in income, even if the yields don't change, we are finding is the lower diesel cost. So the moment the diesel costs come down, the irrigation cost overall comes down, we are finding more profits. In Gujarat, and we have session on Sky, and tomorrow we would have Mr. R.J. Wala, who led the Sky for a long time, would come and talk about the benefits of Sky. Here we are finding that farmers, the Sky is a grid connected scheme where farmers can sell electricity to the grid. And we are finding that selling electricity on an average is contributing to almost 15% of the total income of the households. And not all households get income. And I think that we would go into more detail about why some are earning and some are not earning income from selling electricity. But overall, this is something that's increasing income. Now, when it comes to the third topic, what does SIP do on equity outcomes? Our outcomes are mixed and not so well understood. And our Nepal group led by Manoharaji have been doing these studies looking at the equity and gender implications of solar pump. In Nepal, for instance, we find, and we have colleagues from APC, we actually find that APC has been one of those quite like exceptional, maybe out of the norm, who have been able to prioritize small and marginal farmers and women farmers while giving out subsidized pumps. But yet structural barriers have remained. So we discussed that in, I think, a session that we have around gender and equity later today or tomorrow. In Bangladesh, we are finding that solar irrigation, almost 1/3 of the farmers who are buying water from these solar pumps are actually sharecroppers. And this is higher than their share in overall farmer population. So that's something I think the Bangladesh group is looking more deeply into it. While in Gujarat, we find that it's basically the larger farmers who gets access to SIP. So that SIP would be equitable is certainly something not automatic. It would not happen automatically unless policies and institutions are put in place. Then our third question is around is it the third or the fourth? Anyway, so it's around groundwater. And would SIPs lead to more groundwater pumping? And mostly, why do we expect SIPs to have more? That's because of zero marginal cost. Once you have installed a pump, you're not really paying any tariffs. So this is a kind of a meta review done by one of our colleagues, and it's looking at the cost of energy versus annual hours of pump operation, and everything that is in blue are diesel pumps. So we can see that because diesel pumps have a high hourly running costs. So they almost always they run for a lower number of hours, and everything that you are seeing otherwise are electric or free pumps or something. So that's the expectation, that perhaps if energy is free, then groundwater would be overexploited. And that's, I think, a very valid concern, particularly in regions that are over-extracted groundwater. But what we are finding in Bangladesh, and there is a session on groundwater, and this evidence will be presented, is that we are finding there is no substantial difference in groundwater application for summer paddy between solar and diesel pumps. The reason perhaps is, well, we don't know the reasons quite well, but looks like this particular crop is already very, very water intensive. And I mean, whatever water you apply, overall, the ET of this crop is already quite high, but I don't think we know quite as well why this is happening, but that's something our groundwater group will discuss more in their session about some of the reason. In India, our groundwater group is also looking at and doing these studies. Again, we are finding no significant difference in volume of groundwater pumped by grid-connected solar pumps and electric pump owners. So this is one of the hard rock areas where my colleague Faiz, I think he's in the room, they have been looking at. Basically, while it looks like that the non-sky farmers are pumping a bit more, it's not really statistically significant. The same is true for the alluvial aquifer of Anand. Then one of the highlights of our Gujarat case is, then while it is possible that because of zero marginal cost, you might have higher exploitation of groundwater, but how do we incorporate policies that reduce it? And that's where I think we go back to the first study that the STC had funded, the one that Janine had mentioned, which has started with this grid connection of off-grid solar pump. And that's the kind of pilot now we are doing in Bangladesh as well as in Nepal. And where we are finding, and now we have this larger scheme called Sky, where we are finding that distributed solar generation has various benefits, and we are documenting many of these benefits. These include generation of power by the end user. Feed-in tariffs provide incentive to sell electricity to the grid. So some of our work in Bangladesh is looking at what kind of feed-in tariff works better, whether the current feed-in tariff that is there is incentive enough. So all those work. And then an important aspect that we are looking at is the energy justice aspect. Those who are most impacted are the ones who can earn the most revenue. For example, here what's happening in Saurashtra area, which is really drought prone. So if you have a poor rainfall in a year, then farmers now have the option of not cultivating at all in the dry season. So they would rather sell electricity and earn that revenue. So there's that built-in energy justice angle that is coming in from these kind of projects. So overall, I think we want to frame it in the overall energy justice, energy transition. We are looking at all these are all the three components of energy transition: the pace, the mode, the effectiveness of the transition. And we have pieces of evidence around all of these, which we hope to stitch together during these 2 days to say a narrative, a coherent narrative. Then we are looking at impacts on water, food, and land systems. And then we are also focusing quite a lot, which I think is missing in the current discussions, especially around solar, is around justice and gender and equity, who gains and who loses. And there are sessions related to all of these throughout these 2 days. And I hope that, so I'll finish there. Thank you so much.
We are already living in a 1.1 degree warmer world compared to the pre-industrial times. Science is unequivocal that greenhouse gas emissions due to human activities are causing unprecedented climate change and global temperature rise. Climate change is causing heat waves, extreme precipitation, floods, droughts, melting of glacier, and declining agricultural productivity. If emissions of greenhouse gases do not stop, the world will continue to grow hotter, and current impacts will become even more severe. South Asia will continue to withstand the worst of climate impacts due to high exposure to climate hazards and its pre-existing vulnerabilities. To limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, greenhouse gas emissions from all sectors, including agriculture, must come down rapidly within this decade. In South Asia, groundwater irrigation has been and still is instrumental for poverty alleviation and food security. The region has 25 million or so diesel and electric pumps for irrigation, the largest anywhere in the world, which together account for 8 to 11% of carbon emissions. Replacing fossil fuel-based pumps with solar irrigation pumps is technologically feasible and is picking pace in the region. There are already close to 250,000 solar pumps in the region, with India alone having the most numbers of these pumps. Solar irrigation for agricultural resilience, SOLAR, a project supported by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, SDC, is working on upscaling solar irrigation in the region in fair and sustainable ways. The International Water Management Institute leads the solar project. The project activities are implemented in 4 countries of Bangladesh, India, Nepal and Pakistan, in partnership with government nodal renewable energy agencies. The project works with government partners to answer the following questions. What are the impacts of solar irrigation on men and women farmers' livelihoods? How can solar irrigation be promoted in ways that incentivize efficient use of groundwater? Given the seasonality of irrigation, can capacity utilization of these pumps be improved through grid connection? The project is also helping train women and men farmers and rural solar technicians to use these pumps more efficiently and sustainably and disseminate its findings through national and regional forums. Stay tuned and visit our website for more information.
All right, thank you, Aditi. So we'll now complement this overview of what we know around solar irrigation and energy transition with a presentation from Ulka Kelker. So Ulka is a director climate
disciplinary work, but that's the. Could you just tell me how to change the slide? Which one to do? This one? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So I'll be speaking about 3 things. One is the scale of the challenge. The second is a couple of positive case studies, like the ones that Aditi spoke about, but a little broader than irrigation. And in the third part of my presentation, I'll be speaking a little bit about some of the potential pitfalls. When we speak about a just transition, it is not enough to have environmental benefits. It is not enough to have economic benefits. Maybe ask you, if we think about the emissions from fuel combustion in agriculture for things like diesel pump sets, right? Not looking at electricity, but just diesel pump sets in India. With India's total greenhouse gas emissions, all sectors combined. Do you know how much the diesel pump sets, the irrigation use of diesel in agriculture, what fraction of it of total Indians? Just wild guesses. 15%. You've heard Aditi's, but that was 15% to take wanting to take a guess? 2025. Okay. Anyone wants to go lower, higher? And you can challenge me on the answer also. Yeah. So I'll give a little footnote there with the reference and you can look at it. Yeah. Now it's all. Okay. You'll have to get rid of some of that black stuff. So now we have a whole range. It's it's actually 1% of diesel in agriculture in India as a fraction of the country's total. Yeah, we're all set. Okay. Where do I point this here? I'll just do it. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So that was the question. Yeah. And the answer is 1%. And as I said, this does not include electricity used in agriculture. So India's total CO2 equivalent emissions, which includes all greenhouse gases, was about 3 billion tons. And just for context, the world's are about 50 billion tons. India's is 3 billion tons in total. And the bulk of this comes from energy. And if you go deeper into the energy sector, so the green is the methane emissions that we talk about, right? We are not looking at those. If you look at the energy sector itself, then this is where the breakup comes from. When we look at, using these IPCC approaches, when we look at energy use in agriculture, we don't look at electricity produced, right? So you can't double count. You're either counting electricity production emissions or use emissions, right? So if you do it like this, then agriculture comes to about 1% of India's total emissions. You could, of course, want to calculate it differently. There are these standardized approaches. Anyway, so for me, this is, when climate change is such a big problem that it helps to understand exactly what are we dealing with, right? What is the size of the challenge? Now, going forward, say over the next 3 decades, by the middle of the century, do you know energy consumption in agriculture? It's likely to increase, of course. By how much? Anybody wants to guess? And now I'm talking about electricity because, we've been talking about Aditi's project, which is trying to electrify. Of course, there's a lot of solar already happening. You heard about the schemes, the Sky scheme, Kusum scheme. So business as usual is also not a do nothing scenario, right? There's a lot happening. If current trends continue, how much is energy consumption in Indian agriculture projected to increase? Maybe the foreigners want to take a guess because we don't expect you to know. So 5 times. Okay. Anyone, any student over here? 10 times? Okay. It's actually just 2 times. Yeah. It's double. 1.5. That comes very close. We'll give you the prize. So yeah. So, oops, sorry. So that's what. So this is the projection. So this is from a systems dynamics model that WRI India works on along with energy innovation. And it's all in the public domain. It's all open access. It's built in a platform called Vensim, but there's a very nice web interface. So even if you don't know modeling, you can go and play around with the scenarios. But if you look at where the increase in energy consumption is likely to come from going forward, it's likely to come mainly from industry. And that's natural because we're a developing economy. Electricity itself, electricity generation itself is going to become cleaner even in the business as usual scenario, much more renewables because it's going to become cheaper compared to coal and all of that. So agriculture is that little green band up there. And so it's roughly, if you look at just the agriculture energy consumption, supposed to roughly double. Now let's look specifically at electricity consumption in Indian agriculture. What's your guess about the projected increase? Yeah, so energy means you could be using diesel, but electricity specifically, because we are talking about more electrification. It could be anything, yeah. It could be solar. So I'll not torture you for too much. And I know Marie Charlotte also wants me to stick to time. So it's the same, it's about double, yeah. And this is where we see this is a business as usual scenario again. This is not a decarbonization scenario. But even in a business as usual scenario, we see more electrification happening in all sectors. There's more, say electric cook stoves we are beginning to use in at least in urban homes. Electric vehicles, two-wheelers are beginning to enter the market, right? In agriculture, we find now you can see over here that there is a growing kind of projection of electricity demand. Now, the challenge, of course, is that we need to meet this demand, right? We don't want to reduce the demand in agriculture. We want to meet this demand, but we want to meet it cleanly. We want that the energy-related CO2 emissions in Indian agriculture. Sorry, did I give away the answer already? All right, okay, anyway, never mind. But do you know, so now the green is agriculture, right? You can just make it out. Industry is clearly growing. Transport in the business as usual scenario is growing in terms of CO2 emissions. Can you make out what's happening with agriculture just from a glance? Nothing is happening, right? It's staying the same. So it's, in fact, it's actually decreasing the CO2 emissions. But that's because of things like these solar pump sets, right? So even in the BAU scenario, the country is becoming more efficient, cleaner, et cetera, et cetera. But this is the challenge, right? If you want to have a net zero 2070 decarbonization, business as usual will not be enough, even though it is good, right? You have to go from that black line, which is energy-related CO2 emissions in Indian agriculture, which are flattening or going down, even with current policies. But you need to do more if the sector needs to contribute to the country's net zero target, to that decarbonization target. And we're not talking about land use emissions. It's only energy-related CO2 emissions. And according to our, you can go to this web interface, play around with the various policy levers, and we find that there is a potential for reducing emissions by 80%. And how does this come? Greater electrification. That electricity needs to come from cleaner sources. There needs to be more efficiency. There needs to be more water use efficiency. And we've also introduced a carbon tax on electricity. I won't go into the details today because of lack of time. I'd be happy to answer questions. But these are all fairly conservative assumptions. For example, on carbon tax, we're assuming that by 2050, the carbon tax will slowly go to $50 per ton of CO2. Yeah, that's not by today's standards, a sort of very drastic increase. Same with electrification, energy efficiency. So that's the first part of my presentation, which is about the scale of the challenge. What is it that we're actually dealing with? And that there is progress. Technologies are becoming cheaper. They're becoming more available. But the catch, of course, is that in many parts of the country still, there is a problem in terms of reliable electricity from the grid. And also, these are areas which are highly vulnerable to climate change. So the WRI India team is here from the energy program, and there's a report called Powering Development in Climate Vulnerable Areas. And this photograph is from Assam, from Bongaigaon. And over here, what we find is that the number of heat stress days, extreme heat days, is projected to double by 2030 or 2050. It's also a highly flood affected area, right? It's a quarter of the district is flood prone. And what happens over here is that because of lack of electricity, reliable electricity, because of load shedding, which by the way is happening in South Africa also now, because of load shedding, a lot of the produce, the seeds, the harvest rots. But you cannot depend on the grid to give you reliable electricity for cold storage. So in this particular project, there was a 4.5 kilowatts rooftop solar plant that was set up, 5-ton cold storage plant was set up. And you can read in the report how the farmer producer organization, which is mainly women comprised, is able to store potatoes and seeds and make various cost savings. And also even those farmers who are not members of this FPO are also renting out the cold storage. So this is how more broadly than irrigation, renewable energy can lead to greater income diversification in climate vulnerable areas. This example is from Jharkhand. Jharkhand, this particular district, there's a little video about it. You can go to this YouTube video and look at it. But here again, an NGO worked with a women's self-help group in order to introduce a rice milling machine, which runs on solar power. And here again, you can see that there is a lot of income benefit that comes to the village. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the sort of the pitfalls, the potential pitfalls. And here, as you would see, I'm broadening the conversation from irrigation to other types of agricultural value, food processing, value addition, and all of that. And now I'm going to talk about what is actually the green end of the low carbon transition in India, right? So this is all about the good stuff. This is all about solar power, large scale solar power in India. But even that comes with some concerns, especially as we scale up solar in India. This is from, again, a dashboard called Resource Watch. There's a paper in Nature, you can read it. And you can see this is basically all the solar plants in the world from 2016 to 2018 that have been mapped out. So India is doing very well, as you can see, especially South India, where I'm from. So something definitely to aspire for. Usually we see those same kind of map with the night lights, yeah? And we say, oh, this is bad, right? Because this is electricity use, but this is good stuff. Now, if you look at this Nature paper, 70%, around 70%, the majority of solar installations in India, do you know they came up on what kind of land? Sorry, desert, yeah? Anyone else? Exactly, it was basically on cropland at this time. And sorry, you can't read it, but basically the light brown is cropland. The dark brown, which is on top, is what is called arid land or grassland. And the map on the chart on the right, in fact, tells you that, you know, especially with plants which are solar parks, which are between 1 megawatt and 10 megawatts, there is a bias towards towards arid land. But when you go to more than 10 megawatts, like really big ones, then there's a bias towards cropland, yeah? So this is something that becomes important as we start scaling up the, you know, meeting our solar targets. Right now, we're around roughly 100 gigawatts of solar power in India. This needs to become 300 by another 7 years. So you can just imagine the acceleration that needs to happen, and this land needs to be acquired fast, and the solar parks need to come up fast. So we went to one solar park near Bangalore. This is Pavagada Solar Park. And in fact, just like you're all going to visit this site, there are a lot of these G20 country people who are in Bangalore this week, and they're visiting Pavagada Solar Park. And let me just put a caveat there that this is a good thing. In Pavagada, farmers did not sell their land, they leased their land. And they got an assured income with, in fact, an inflation rate built in. And if you compare it with the kinds of income that they get year to year from farming, it's about the same. But the difference is that this is assured income, and from the very drought-prone, very dry land, rain-fed region, getting the farming income is not a guarantee. So this is what economists call income smoothing, right? You get assured income versus erratic, unreliable income. However, what's happening over here that, you know, we compared 3 villages where the farmers leased their land to the solar park, and the neighboring 2 villages which were not selected, similar terrain, similar people, similar social structure, similar occupations. And of course, there are people leaving agriculture anyway. There is migration to cities, people are getting more educated, agriculture is getting harder. But if you compare these control villages, we find that about 24% there was a decline in 2015 and 2021. But in the Pavagada Solar Park, obviously, naturally, by definition, because they gave away their land to the solar park, the decline of the land under cultivation was 88%. Now, the farmers, the landowners, of course, got compensated. But there were also a lot of workers who were landless workers who don't get compensated and who don't even get, in fact, consulted in the process of what the compensation should be. So we find that workers employed by cultivators also fell drastically by 82% compared with 12% in the neighboring villages. And women in particular were affected a lot because about half the women lost their jobs, and women are not able always to leave the village to go out and seek other opportunities. This area is also quite dependent on pastoralism. So we find that households practicing livestock farming also declined by 42%, compared with only 8% decline in the neighboring villages. And this also has implications for the, now those who do still practice livestock farming have to travel longer distances. There might be conflicts with people from the other villages who are grazing their land, grazing their livestock on those lands. So there is a change happening. Of course, the solar park is also creating jobs. but not that many jobs, right? Once the construction is done, which could be done by migrant laborers, the local workers may not get too many job options. There are, of course, there's security jobs, there's some engineering jobs, there's cleaning jobs. Even on cleaning, earlier there were concerns that water would have to be used to wash the solar panels. But now MNRE actually has a technical order saying, don't use water, you should have robotic dry cleaning, right? So that's a good thing from a resource conservation perspective, but from a job perspective, it means fewer cleaning jobs as well. So the people who are able to get the jobs in the solar park, again, largely belong to the landowning upper caste households, because that's some kind of dialogue that was happening. So I'll end with a couple of points that about then what's the way forward. We need to explore coexistence of different occupations. So can you have sheep grazing in particular, not goats? Goats will destroy the panels apparently, but sheep grazing in the gaps between the solar panels. Could you have vegetable farming if there is a little bit of an increase in height of the solar panels? And we know from other cases that it's not easy to do this. Any of this will add to the costs. It will add to the project costs. It will add to the administrative costs, but perhaps there needs to be some kind of rule or some kind of policy change, just like happened with the water cleaning, right? The other thing is that when there are jobs that are lost, there needs to be special attention made for reskilling for women in particular, in a way that that training is done for women in the, where they can access it. This photograph is from a different story. This is from another district in Karnataka, where there was a lot of effort made for waste collection, more systematic waste collection. But women were also trained to drive the waste collection vehicles, the auto tippers. So we need that kind of thing. And finally, we will need safety nets, especially employment guarantee schemes. There was a recent report by the International Labour Organization, which counted jobs in nature-based solutions around the world. And they found that there are 75 million jobs already in nature-based solutions. So this means planting trees, watershed conservation, watershed management. They found that 80% of these 75 million jobs are in one country, India. And they're under one scheme, the MNREGA, right? So because MNREGA supposedly uses 65% of its funds for these kinds of ecosystem restoration type of activities, that's really the bulk of where the NBS jobs are. So we need more government and other kinds of development aid going for employment guarantee schemes, because that is the only way in which the new job opportunities that are created, if they don't benefit everybody, if everyone doesn't have access, then we make sure that no one is left behind. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Thanks a lot, Ulka, for this big picture and for coming back to this justice issue behind the energy transition. I'm aware that in the agenda, we were initially thinking that we would have time for some question and answer. Unfortunately, that won't be the case for now. So maybe keep your question in mind, go to the speakers during the breaks, and anyway, that's the beginning, and what we discussed, we'll come back into details into those issues during the parallel session. So I'll just leave Shreya, who have some information for the remaining of the day and some in-house words. Thank you.